So operationalizing sustainability. A lot of times when we're putting our sustainability decarb plans into place, we have to think about how we go across the enterprise and across an organization. So first, starting with you, Vic, what are your thoughts on how companies today collect, review, govern data in order to drive the decision-making process?
Thank you, Renee. I think it almost sounds like a cliche, but we all know that what cannot be measured cannot be improved. So first and foremost, you got to start with what is the strategy that you have. What are you going to measure? How are you going to measure? And most importantly, how does that fit into the business context of the organization? If you're measuring, today's world, I was just having a conversation last night over dinner. I think buildings is the only place where actually we do have a lot of data available today. And a lot of the data is real-time data that is available and that can be acted upon. As Renee shared, that 40% of the carbon footprint is trapped in the buildings, so we can act upon that. And not only we can act upon that, then the question is, how do we have a strategy that aligns with what impact we want to make, what is the benefit, and what are the trade-offs we have coming from that? So I think that is where we got to start.
Wonderful. All right, Matt, so Microsoft has some pretty ambitious sustainability targets. Can you share what those are and how your thoughts on how data can drive decarbonization?
Sure, yeah. So Microsoft is not new to the world of sustainability. We set our first sustainability targets back in 2009. And we were able to achieve carbon neutrality by 2012, predominantly through offsets. But we were able to also do a bunch of things over the following decade, including instituting a carbon fee across our organization, where we put a price on the cost of carbon for a lot of the organizations that sit across Microsoft. You'll hear a little bit about that more later today in one of the later sessions. But then in 2020, we upped our ambition and set new true net zero targets. So to be net negative by 2030, which means we're taking more carbon out of the atmosphere than we're putting into it. We also have similar goals around water. So water positive, waste zero, and then to protect more land than we use by 2030. And then to make our lives even more fun, by 2050 to retroactively take all of the carbon out of the atmosphere since the company's founding in 1975. And that's for all three scopes of emissions. So those are our ambitions, those are our goals. Truly would not be able to make any progress against that if it were not for data. Like many organizations that exist in the market today, for the longest time, we were using Excel spreadsheets to be able to manage all of the data for across our enterprise and our supply chain. What we ultimately did is we took all of those, sort of disparate Excel spreadsheets that we would review and we would monitor, perhaps once a year for reporting purposes. We took all of those, put those in a data lake. We were able to use AI and other sort of models to help us manage and understand all of the data that sat across our enterprise. And then we use Power BI to be able to help us visualize and understand the data. And so what that helped us to do is get much more precise and specific about what parts of the business had the highest sources of emissions. And so we were able to go and allocate resources to go target those specific sources and make much more meaningful change over time. So that's how we're using data every day to be able to do that. And so really automation, AI has been a game changer for us to better understand the data and then to take action against that data.
That's great. Well, and I think, one of the big pieces of sustainability is how do we make this look like the rest of the business? So if you look at the rest of the business and other functions, whether it be waste, water management, P&L, people are looking at data daily and can make then improvements real time. So I think with sustainability, part of the trick of what we have is, one, how do we make it look like the rest of the business? So that way it's not just some nice people that sit in a different part of the office, but make it part of the business operations. So specific on there's such an opportunity for data to drive real-time or near real-time emissions reduction. So it's not we're looking at it a quarter later or a year later, and now what are we going to do? So do you have any examples of innovative ways that you've used this data for the real-time emission reduction?
Yeah, I think specific to the built environment, what's been interesting is we had, across our Redmond campus as just sort of one use case, all of these disparate energy management systems. We have over 125 buildings, 60,000 employees that sit within Redmond. I think we had something like a $60 million annual electricity bill and energy bill. And so just so much disparate data across all of these different systems. And so one of the first things that we did, and we're definitely a first mover in sort of the building space from a corporate perspective, put sensors on everything from fire hydrants to HVAC blowers to lighting to conference rooms to better understand what was going across our ecosystem to help us better optimize our operations, to start predicting things before they would break down. And it was super helpful for us to have a single pane of glass across our entire enterprise to understand the health of every part of the campus. And so we ended up creating more data to help us better understand sort of what you were talking about earlier. I mean, it's such a rich space for collecting data. And so, we ended up taking full advantage of that. And I think there were two use cases that I think are unique and interesting that all of that data helped us to figure out. And number one, we have a better understanding of our scope 1 and 2 emissions. We've made some pretty substantial progress against that. In 2022, we reduced it by about 22%. One area which represented a large part of our scope 1 and 2 emissions was our kitchens on our Redmond campus. And so about, the typical number is 75% to 80% of industrial equipment within industrial kitchens comes and is powered by gas. And so we ended up sort of taking this sort of innovative step to create a new lab for electric kitchens. And so a lot of the equipment hadn't actually been created. And so we leaned in, we brought in people from across the kitchen, sort of department to help us innovate and create in partnership with the OEMs to create induction grade kitchen and cooking equipment. So we have a fully functional electric kitchen powered by induction. We have that live as of last year, and we are using it as sort of a lab of innovation, and we're scaling it across the rest of the campus, not only as a retrofit for our existing kitchens, but also for all of the new greenfield buildings that we're building within Redmond. And so it's just sort of a cool way in which we've tried to be innovative and creative, leveraging the data to help us identify the biggest sources of emissions, and then actually taking action against it using innovation, really pushing the envelope with our supply chain and changing the game in a lot of ways. I think the second use case, I won't take up too much time, but obviously an area we're very passionate about. But we have an executive briefing center on our campus. It's where a lot of our customers and partners come to learn more about what Microsoft is doing from a technology perspective. In the basement, there are 2 levels of a garage. It's an older building, and so several years ago, we had installed these 2 industrial grade fans, plugged them in on each level, and the goal was that during the summer, all of the exhaust would just collect in the garage. And so our facilities team just plugged these fans into each of the different levels, and they just ran for years and years and years. And by installing some of the IoT sensors across our buildings, we were able to identify the spike in emissions within the EBCs, and we're like, where's this coming from? And all of the energy that was being utilized in that building. And so we were able to find the source of those issues, being those fans. And we were able to take more meaningful action so that we turned them on when we actually needed them to be turned on. And then during the winter, when it wasn't as much of an issue, it wouldn't be a problem. And we ended up saving something like $30,000 a month or something. It was crazy. So
No, and I love these examples. We had a similar situation with the kitchens, right? We're a global manufacturer of HVAC equipment. So when we think about scope 1 emissions, we're thinking of these production lines and all this fossil fuel we have to decarbonize. Well, we have a tool called Net Zero Advisor. It's a Johnson Controls tool that links into all of our businesses or into each of our plants. And we saw first thing in the morning, we were through the roof, and it was because everyone turned on the ovens in the cafeteria first thing in the morning. Even though you weren't eating till noon, everything got turned on. And so this is where it's a complex problem because there's so many places you could go and start. But how the data can simplify the problem by these little things. Oh, why are we turning on ovens at 8 o'clock? Let's just wait, and then turn them off afterwards. Or why are the lights always on? Or, sometimes it's these simple fixes that you can make before you have to get to what we call deep decarbonization, right? Electrifying full lines. How can you use the data to start making progress now? And most of the time, you're saving money. Yeah. And I always make sure you track that, because that's my pot. Well, I don't get it right now, but that's my pot of investment dollars that I then can use later when it starts to get real expensive. So Vic, you have the opportunity to look across companies and across sectors. What is kind of your guidance of best practice of how companies are using data to make these decisions?
Yeah, I think what we need to get out of the mindset is that it is only internal looking, and which means that we will save cost. Actually, we did a study across 8 industries. There is $3.4 trillion business opportunity to create new business and new revenues for companies. And this is all underpinning the use of the data. Some of the industries are like food, travel, packaging, home health, home mobility. So basically, you need to look at what does that data going to create a new business model for you, and how do you create that opportunity. Now, you also have to look at how does that fit into your overall productivity metrics. We did another study, and companies which have strong ESG metrics, they scored better when it came to ROI. They had 2.6 times better ROI than their peers who did not. And similarly, on operating margin, companies that had very clear ESG metrics and they were going after, they had the data to support and report and to improve, they had 4.7 times better operating margin than their peers who were not. So essentially, these examples are showing that not only can you improve your own efficiency internally, get after the cost, but also go after new revenue models. And I feel that is where big shift is happening. We were just talking about the data and the examples, and I think there is a big tie-in about employee productivity. So, we have different groups of companies being represented here, and I don't know what the median age of each of the companies is. At Accenture, our median age is 31. We have 730,000 employees. There's a big push coming from our employees that we want to be working for a sustainable company. And so you got to empower your employees with this data as well. I've started to see more and more companies, and we definitely have been doing it for a couple of years or more, where there's a dashboard on what is my emissions from my travel. So when I'm booking my travel, I have the optionality to see the choices I'm making, how is that impacting my emission. So I think all of that ties in, internal looking at new revenue models, and using data as a vehicle to improve that productivity and engagement with the employees.
I think it's great. I think a lot of times we think about data as, I'll say, sometimes separate and apart from all the or from all the improvements that you can put in place. But this is the puzzle piece of data and how it's so important, because you can show people what their carbon footprint is. Maybe half people care, half people don't. But over time, when they get accustomed to seeing their year-on-year carbon, as we're starting to lock into place some different carbon fee mechanisms, to start to see how much is this really costing, that all of a sudden you're starting to see, I'll say, self-improvement. Whether that be in the own employee, within their function. And I always say, this is about getting the best minds in that function to work. Because typically you're not going to have a sustainability team that has the expertise to go across functions. You need to find people within that function who understand the data and then can start the improvement. Okay, great. So I'm going to pivot to AI, the ever powerful, interesting topic of AI. And for me, I think, on one hand, AI can be so powerful when it thinks about how do we accelerate decarbonization and get really smart and focused of where we need to go. But then with ESG reporting, I think there's a couple forces going on. One, AI can help us with reporting from a regulatory standpoint, right? So how do we make sure we get the absolute right data that's within the constraints that then can be verified by a third-party assurer? But then also we've seen from our financial investors and community, they're using AI to mine our data and our habits, and it's not just based on those sustainability reports. So I see AI as really going to be a game changer, and then creates both the carrot and the stick for improvement. So AI, Matt, I'm going to start with you. So everyone is talking about AI, as you know. So Microsoft is a leader with Copilot. What are some of AI's game-changing capabilities around decarb?
Yeah, look, I think first of all, I'll say we are very clear-eyed about the challenges from an energy perspective that AI consumes and utilizes much more energy, and as a result, typically does emit more carbon as a result of that. But I think first of all, we are doing a lot to address that, and so I think it's important to comment. I think number one, we've spent a lot of time baselining and understanding where we are today, so we understand where we need to focus and invest our time, energy, and resources. I think number two, we are building very advanced plans within our data centers to decarbonize our data centers. We have a goal to achieve 100% renewable energy powered data centers by 2025, and we are on track to meet that. We're also investing in new chips, right, that are much more energy efficient, including our Azure Cobalt chip that was announced just last fall. And then I think the other thing that we're doing too is investing in green software, right? So we are a member of the Green Software Foundation, which works to help try and drive efficiencies in the code and the AI models that we are releasing in market. And of course, Copilot is helping us to scale that to users around the world. So I think that's important to note, just because I know we get that question a lot, and it's something that we're very seriously tackling. But what I'll note about game-changing capabilities, I think there's really three key areas. I think number one, the ability to measure, predict, and optimize is super important. So we're using AI to help us start detecting anomalies, understand correlations, and better understand the data across our organization. I mean, just to give an example of this, so earlier when I was talking about adding sensors across all of our buildings, we were able to achieve about 20 to 27% energy efficiency just based off of the location, just from understanding the data, having it in a single pane of glass. By adding AI, we've already been able to realize about 15% additional savings within 2 weeks of using some of our AI models to review the data from our buildings. So again, the ability to manage, predict, and optimize is super important for us from that perspective when we're using AI to do that. I think the second area is we are investing in, AI really helps us to accelerate our investment in building out new sustainability solutions. And so, I think fairly straightforward, but, how do we increase the time to market for net new renewable energy sources, like fusion technology? And so Microsoft has invested in a lot of those net new nascent technologies. And so we are using AI to support them. And then the last area that I would note is really just empowering the workforce, right? I think we as users of these solutions are so much more productive and efficient and effective in our jobs if we have the tools and resources to help us scale and execute more quickly. So I think those three are really the three game-changing components of AI that at least we're seeing at Microsoft.
Great. Okay, last question to you, Vic. So how are you seeing AI change ESG regulatory reporting?
So I think first and foremost, on the reporting side, we are developing a LLM as well. We're training it to actually scan and create the reporting in a much efficient and effective manner. I think our original estimate is that it'll cut down the time that it takes by 70%, if not more. To report? To actually gather all the data and to report, so it'll cut down that effort significantly. Second, as you mentioned, Matt, about Green Software Foundation, which we are also part of, I think it's very important that use AI as responsibly and make sure that those green software principles are definitely used to develop. Otherwise, we will end up solving a problem and creating a new problem. And I think I will give another example, which is not from the buildings. I think you give plenty on that. We recently worked with a cement manufacturer. We are using AI and machine learning. We were able to cut down CO2 emissions by 3 million tons per year. Now, that is great. We should all get an applause for that. But even better, that process actually improved the cost efficiency. The savings just from a cost perspective was $150 million across all the plants. So now that becomes a big driver, big business metric that you cannot ignore. So I think you have to use AI responsibly, but also a way where there is a business benefit clearly quantifiable to get to those lower emissions.
Great. Well, I'll tell you, as a reporter, I'm very excited about cutting down the time to report. So that's the time we have for data and AI. Couple of key takeaways. I think if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Enterprise engagement, so we get more scale and efficiency. And the last piece, just how AI is going to be able to supercharge the progress. So thank you guys for your time.